All right, so self-driving cars, they're popping up everywhere, right? And that brings up this massive question. How do we actually know they're safe? Like, really, truly safe to be on our roads?
It's one thing to ride in one and think, yeah, this feels safe. But proving it? That's a whole different ballgame. So what's actually on the checklist before these things get the green light? Today we're going to dive into that, using a fascinating paper from Waymo as our guide.
Okay, so first things first, we have to get past just feelings. The entire industry is trying to figure out how to move beyond that gut feeling of, it seems okay, and get to a hard, provable standard for safety.
And that standard, it actually has a name. It's called absence of unreasonable risk, or AUR for short. Now, this is the key. The goal isn't zero risk. That's just impossible, right? Instead, it's all about methodically finding, evaluating, and squashing down any leftover risks to a bare minimum before that car ever hits the road with passengers.
So the big question is, how do you even measure that? Well, what's really interesting is that there's no single magic number or one test that does it all. It turns out proving a car is safe needs a much bigger, more holistic approach. For a while, there's been this big debate, almost like two camps fighting it out. On one side, you've got the big picture people. They're all about the stats. Are we seeing fewer crashes overall? But then you've got the other camp, the by-the-book folks who say, nope, that's not enough. The car has to follow every single rule every single time, no exceptions.
But here's the breakthrough idea from this paper. It's a false choice. You don't have to pick one. A really solid safety framework has to do both. It needs to look at the big picture stats and zoom in on how the car behaves in every little moment. That's the only way you get the full picture.
Okay, so if you're doing both, what does that actually look like in practice? Well, it looks like a gauntlet. Seriously, the paper lays out these 12 critical safety checks, and every single software update has to run through this gauntlet before it ever sees the light of day.
And here they are. They're kind of grouped into three big buckets. First, you have the foundation, right? The nuts and bolts. Things like system safety, making sure it can't be hacked, all that core stuff. Then there's the really interesting part, on-road behavioral performance. This is all about how the car actually drives. And finally, there's the oversight piece, the processes that make sure everything is being managed the right way, from beginning to end.
And if you look closer, some of these are really fascinating. Take a look at number 5, predicted collision risk. It's not just about, did it crash? No, they actually compare its performance directly to a human driver benchmark. The bar isn't just to be safe, it's to be provably safer than a person. But here's one that might surprise you, impeded progress. This one checks if the car is too cautious. If it's constantly braking for no reason, causing traffic jams, and just generally being an annoyance. Because a car that's unpredictably timid can actually cause dangerous situations with the humans around it. So being a predictable, well-behaved car on the road is a huge part of being safe.
But, and I really want to hammer this point home, not a single one of these 12 checks is a magic bullet. You can't just look at one and say, yep, it's safe. Any single one is an incomplete story. Real confidence, that only comes when you put all 12 signals together. It's the combination that gives you that comprehensive picture of risk.
Okay, so you've run the gauntlet, you've collected all this data from all 12 checks. Now what? Who actually makes the final call? This is where the humans come back into the picture in a big way.
And it's really important to understand this isn't like a simple test where a computer just spits out a pass or fail. The final decision is much more nuanced. It's a risk management judgment call made by actual people with a ton of experience.
And there's a clear chain of command for this. Think of it like 3 levels of accountability. At the bottom, you have the methodology owners. These are the engineers and experts actually running the tests and crunching the numbers. They report up to a steering committee of senior leaders who look at everything and put together a formal recommendation. And then, at the very top, you have the safety board. They're the final authority. They get the final say.
And this safety board has way more options than just a big rubber stamp that says yes or no. They can get really specific. They can say, okay, it's approved, but only to drive in these specific neighborhoods. Or let's roll it out to just 10% of the fleet first. They can even cap the total number of miles it's allowed to drive. It's all about having these fine-tuned controls to manage risk.
So let's say a new update gets the green light. It's out there, on the road. Is the job done? Absolutely not. The work is never, ever over. Safety has to be this continuous, ongoing process.
And that's where that final check, field safety, becomes so critical. This is basically a team whose whole job is to watch the fleet out in the real world 24/7. They're hunting for any new or weird risks that nobody saw coming. And here's the kicker.
They have the power to pull the plug and suspend the entire service if they find something serious. So when you step back and look at this whole thing, you realize the goal isn't just to make one company's cars safe. The bigger idea here is to create a blueprint, a standardized framework that the entire industry could use. Imagine if everyone was speaking the same language when it comes to safety. That's how you start to build real public trust, and it's how you help create smart regulations for the future.
Which really leaves us with this one big question, right? We've just walked through how this incredibly complex problem of is it safe can be broken down into a really rigorous, detailed process. So you have to wonder, could a universal, transparent checklist just like this be the actual key, the thing that finally unlocks widespread public trust and gets us all comfortable with our driverless future?